All right, time to talk some U.S.-Mexico with a man who has been in these rivalry matches, these derbies per se, and also has done a number of commentary matches recently with TUDN. He's Marcelo Balboa. Marcelo, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you on because I watched your call of the game, picking up minimal Spanish, but certainly I do it to keep working myself out when it comes to learning the language. But let's get into one thing. I have called this, in my very humble opinion, one of the most defining, maybe a watershed moment for the U.S. national team against Mexico when it comes to controlling and managing a game. This is the most comfortable I've ever felt in a U.S.-Mexico match.
What, I have to agree. If you go back to the last three games, especially Nations League, it's probably overall for me one of the best games Nation League. So it was back and forth. Then you look at Gold Cup, and I thought Mexico had a little bit more run of the play. And if you go back and look at stats, possession leans towards Mexico. And even in this last game, you look at possession, I think Mexico edged out the United States. But I got to say, and I said it on air, and I used a word that was used a lot in the previous games, I felt the U.S. dominated. And I get Mexico had a chance with Corona and Chucky Lozano, great save by Zach Steffen. But after that, it was all U.S. So I felt that was probably one of the most dominating performances I've seen a U.S. team against Mexico.
I would agree with you 100%. By the way, the possession supposedly was 51%, 49 to Mexico. Yeah. But that's why I think sometimes the analytics lie, because the eye test made me feel the exact same way that you felt. By the way, the U.S. outshot them in a very, very big way. 18 shots, 5 on target. Mexico, 8 shots, 4 on goal. I thought for the most part, outside of that mistake from Adams when he hit the flat ball, which led to the Lozano shot, I thought that midfield really deserves a lot of credit. Let's start with them. McKinney, Adams, and also Musa.
I think when you looked at that play, Yedlin does a fantastic job because Zimmerman and Miles Robinson were nowhere to be found. They got sucked into the midfield a little bit. And the run that Yedlin makes from that side of the field, from the right back to cut across and cut off so Chucky couldn't go to the far post. He could only go to that near post. It's absolutely fantastic. So, but if you look at the midfield, Weston McKennie was good. Musa, I think, struggled a little bit, and then he got into the rhythm of the game and he got better. Tyler Adams is just a rock, man. He just sits in that back. He does make sure that nothing goes down the middle. He's a leader. He's moving players around, organizing. So, when you go man for man in that midfield, the U.S. controlled the midfield a little better than Mexico did. And again, when you win big games like this, it's won in the midfield. It's not won by one forward. It's won by the work rate. The work rate that Weston McKennie has, that Musa has, and the organization of Tyler Adams.
Agree with you 100%. I think they outplayed Romo, Herrera, and Alvarez. And I think what we sometimes forget from the outside is that a very strong performance there makes it easier for everybody behind you. And it may hide deficiencies that we all have, maybe, that all players might have. And at the end of the day, that performance in midfield to me was the tone setter. Let's talk about Anthony Robinson and the way he controlled that left side of the field. I thought he was outstanding.
I got to say, we've always talked about depth on the left-hand side. And, we always say we've never had a left-footed left back. And I think Robinson proved that you don't need to have a left-footed player. He was up and down the wing. And yes, listen, they got in behind him a few times because he was attacking so much. But, man, the work rate he had up and down the field, chasing players down, closing Corona down, then Chucky and Corona switched. Now he has to mark Chucky Lozano. So, I think defensively, one of his best performance I've seen. And the same with Yedlin, because you didn't see Yedlin going forward much, but when he it was perfectly timed. It was at the right opportunity, but they did a nice job of making sure that the top three between Corona, Jimenez, and Chucky Lozano didn't have much success.
No, they didn't. Their sword was dulled. And by the way, Robinson's playing, I thought he played a lot of the game in the Mexico half of the field. Didn't allow Chaco Rodriguez to get forward at all. I mean, I think Chaco Rodriguez was targeted and they took advantage of him.
I think, I've gotten in trouble a little bit over the last few days. One, I think Rodriguez should have been pulled from the game. He should have got a red card for trying to grab Aronson in the nose by the eyes, trying to get him off the ground. And if there was VAR, he would have been thrown out of the game for what he did.
No
so
question.
he was very fortunate. But I'll be honest with you, I think that whole back line struggled. I think the biggest surprise were the two center backs. The fact that they struggled. The back line couldn't really, you never really saw the back line getting into the attack like we're used to seeing that back line. So Edson Alvarez, for me, was probably their best player.
Yeah, Gallardo and Rodriguez didn't get forward a lot, which I think
Yeah.
tells you part of the story of how good the U.S. was.
Listen, that was probably the worst I've seen Gallardo play. And Rodriguez never really got into the game. And they couldn't get into the attack because Tim Weah did a fantastic. Listen, to me, the best player, especially that second half, was Tim Weah. He decided to bring it to a different level. He decided to go at Rodriguez. He got that ball. He whipped it in. He got around Gallardo. I mean, it was nice to see him step up. You know, I mean, Aronson the same way. Listen, Aronson was a little quieter, but the work rate, the pressing. I mean, listen, what they did for 90 minutes of pressing Mexico, not allowing Mexico to feel comfortable, not allowing Mexico to play. Listen, they broke the line maybe 3 times in a 90-minute game because the U.S. pressed so hard. Now, go back, I think tactically, I think I can honestly say tactically, Greg Berhalter outdid Tata Martino. He did not allow Mexico to breathe in the United States.
Suffocated them totally.
Yep.
I agree with you 100%. Never allowed them to get a rhythm really on the entire day. Their chances came off, a mistake and maybe a moment or two, which we know Mexico can always produce. But I agree with you 100%. I thought it was actually a bit remarkable. I was very interested to see how the second half would start because the U.S. had a great final 15 minutes. All over them, combination play, tricks and flicks. And to carry that over into the second half, I thought was really impressive. Set the tone.
Yeah. No, listen, when you come out of the second half, if you come out flat, then you allow Mexico to have a little bit of joy. And as you get a little bit of joy, 5, 6, 7, 8 passes, you start building confidence. And the U.S. never allowed that. And listen, Mexico's a good team. Let's not disrespect. They're a good team, but they just, maybe the cold, maybe the rain, something affected them. Besides the U.S., because that's not the typical Mexican team we've seen. And that's why I said, listen, in Edmonton, tomorrow night, it's going to be snowing, they said. It's going to be maybe 15 degrees. And even right now, the Canadian coach is like, we've been training on this field. We're ready. We've seen what the U.S. has done. So they're ready. I'm like, listen, I hate to say it, but Canada could get the result they need tomorrow against Mexico.
Isn't it refreshing that the elements sometimes plays a part in it? I know you don't want it to jade the competition too much, but sometimes I think it's great that you have to adjust because look, everybody's got to adjust every single time they go to Azteca Stadium with fog, with all the other things, altitude. So, I mean, I think it's all fair play, don't you?
Listen, this is part of qualifying. Listen, in Mexico, I told you before, every team has their advantage. One team cuts the grass long. One team, lets the grass grow long. The other one, and Santos, the field's a little harder because of being in the desert. Everybody has an advantage. The other night, I got to be honest with you, I didn't think the rain affected anybody. It was decently cold, but not, 15 degrees. So I thought it was a good night for everybody to play. Listen, if you play in Europe, you're used to this weather, right? So I didn't think that the elements, we'll say, affected the game tremendously. I think it gave an advantage a little bit to the U.S. because being that cold, if it was 70 degrees, 80 degrees in a smoggy day, there's no way the U.S. could have pressed the way they pressed I'm going to go 80 minutes out of 90. They pressed. They pressed and pressed. At altitude, you can't do that. You can't do that because you're not used to altitude. So listen, the when everything falls into place, it fell into place against Mexico.
Yeah, that leash of being able to, that's a great point you make, enable that pressing game. And I mean, even when their attacks broke down with Mexico defending thick and heavy and in a low block, the U.S. would get the ball back or force them into a bad ball. It was really was remarkable. Marcelo Balboa joining us here, had the call on TUDN, the former U.S. men's national team center back, also does the Colorado Rapids. I want to take you into some of the other players. Tim Weah, you mentioned, outstanding game here. Aronson as well. It's interesting when we go and look at people reviewing players after this game, it's all over the map, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes people are trying to get a rise with some of their comments. Some of them I don't know actually where they're coming from. It's what makes the world go round. But despite the fact that Aronson, to many people's thought, didn't have a great game, his effort was relentless. He was not a liability. He had a couple of flicks and things to release players that I thought was really interesting. And I think he just continues to grow in my eyes as well.
Listen, I think there's two sides of the game, the offensive side and the defensive side. Was he great offensively? No, I don't think it was his best game, but I also don't think that he had a lot of room to be creative. I mean, look at Weah. Weah, second half, was able to break free. But the work rate, and I want people to go back and look at that game and watch the pressing, the work rate, the repressing that Aronson did. It was spectacular, man. If it wasn't for him, half of the pressing on the left side of the field wouldn't have happened. And again, I think sometimes in those games, it's the effort defensively you've got to make to release a Weston McKennie or release a Robinson to create some space. So listen, sure, offensively it wasn't great. I still would have given him a 6 or a 7 because the work rate he did defensively was ridiculous.
The wingers were inverted a lot too. There was so much pressure and they backed Mexico in so much. Weah was coming inside. Aronson was coming inside, and actually the wide game was really being provided by your outside backs, mostly Anthony Robinson, which I thought was incredibly interesting. It just showed you how far back the U.S. was pushing Mexico.
Yeah, again, I think that was the tactical part that Greg Berhalter wanted, because if you allow Mexico to play out of the back, it makes it a little bit more comfortable for them. They knock 2, 3, 4, like we talked about earlier, 5 passes. They're building in confidence. I remember at one point it was out of the back off a goal kick. It went 2 passes back to Ochoa, and Ochoa hit it long. And that's not what we're used to seeing Mexico about. So again, I don't think it was their best game. We know they're going to bounce back against Canada, but let me be honest with you. Canada's ready. I know they didn't have a great game the other day against Costa Rica, but they're ready. You watch them and their mentality and what they did in Azteca. This is a team that is maybe 2 wins away, maybe, from almost locking down their first bid in the World Cup, I believe, since '86. So they're hungry. They're hungry.
86 in Mexico is the last time.
86. Yeah. That's a hungry group right now.
That is a hungry group.
Those to me are the most dangerous teams because they're solid all the way around. They've got pace. They've got a goal scorer. So playing at home in the cold weather that they're used to, I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's results to see what happens.
Marcelo Balboa joining us here. Again, former U.S. men's national team center back, well over 100 caps, has played in World Cups. You saw him on TUDN. Also, probably high on his list of achievements, 6 years on HDNet with me, which I'm not sure.
There we go.
That's definitely, it's got to be below 5 or 6 in your rankings. But listen, hey, it's better to be there than not be there.
Exactly.
Okay, so we had a great time on those shows.
We did.
All right, let's talk about the fact that, do you think the change is occurring now? I look at this national team, I say, wow, here's the silver lining of not qualifying for the last World Cup. It accelerated the opportunity for these guys. Unprecedented to have this many players at big clubs around the world with the names Juventus, Dortmund, Chelsea, right? You go to Qatar with this team, you qualify and get there. It's a push. It's another great vat of getting experience. These guys are going to be now probably 25 and 26, 24, 25, 26, and 2026. There's nothing but real positive looking forward here, I think, right now. And could we be flipping the tables on Mexico?
Everybody talks about the giants of Mexico, of CONCACAF. It's a weird question because now a lot of people are telling me the only way the U.S. could be the giants of Mexico, overtake Mexico, is if they beat them in Azteca. Well, that's like saying Dan Marino didn't win a Super Bowl, so he's not a Hall of Famer. You know what I'm saying? It's a weird for me, it's a very weird comment, but
You know what that is. That's called conditioning the situation.
no,
You
I
got
know.
you got to grab some low-hanging fruit to defend your position.
It's hard to, after so many years of being dominant on Mexico's side, it's hard to see change. It's hard to see change. But if you look at soccer objectively, the US is at that point where they're ready to take over CONCACAF. And I'm not saying listen, Canada's going to fight for that too now. You know what I mean? Canada's got a good team, but I think Mexico will have a harder time over the next year with qualifying. People are starting to understand how to play them a little bit more. They'll qualify, but I think that we were forced into pushing all these youngsters quickly into international soccer. The Tyler Adams, the Weston McKinneys. We brought all Tim Weah. Look at the group of players we had to bring in because we didn't qualify for the World Cup. So we had a window of 2.5 years to get these kids ready for what we're seeing right now in this World Cup qualifying stage. Did we have hiccups? Yes, because you know what? It's not easy going to Honduras and getting a result. It's not easy going to Salvador on this fields that players aren't used to playing on because they're used to playing in Europe or MLS in these plush fields. So it's taken them a little time, but I think the US has already overtaken, not by a lot, but overtaken Mexico because they will outrun them, they will outfight them, and we saw it in the last game. Mexico couldn't keep up with it. They could, at one point, they finally broke down, and that's when the goal came. So it's reality. It's just reality. It's natural. It's going to happen, and it's happening now.
Marcelo, I just want to make sure, though, that we don't put this all down to effort. There's no doubt there was an incredible pressing effort. You pointed that out. In some ways, that's got to be a prerequisite, but to do that for that amount of time, which you pointed out beautifully, is not an easy thing to do. You have to have the right weather conditions, everything else. But yeah. I want to say there was some attractive soccer played here by the U.S. players, and we have to admit that this is a group now that technically is rising to the occasion as well.
Yeah, but in order for them to keep rising, it can't be against Mexico and then a bad, not a great performance against Jamaica. Consistency is what we want to see. Consistency what makes a great team. Okay, with what they did against Mexico, we need to see that type of soccer. Maybe not the pressing. I get it. You're in Jamaica. Weather's different, the climate's different, completely get it. But that brand of soccer, ball in, ball out, ball wide, players going at each other, that's what we want to see. And that's what we need to see against Jamaica. We can't take a step backwards now because you can't go to Jamaica and press them like you did the other night. It was, again, 30-something degrees. It was perfect weather for these young guys to run and press. But we want to see attractive, free-flowing, attacking soccer, too, when we do have the ball. So I think that's the next step. Can we see this consistently?
Marcelo, you have the last word. Thank you so much for coming on as always. We appreciate it. You are one of the all-time Caps leaders also on Soccer Matters on ESPN 97.5 on the Horn in Austin. You can put that up in your trophy room as well. We will send you a T-shirt, Marcelo.
Thank you.
Thank you as always, Cello. We appreciate it.
Anytime, buddy. Good luck.
And thanks for the objective viewpoint on the broadcast. Very good.